The morning sun cast long shadows across the Galactic Military Academy's main courtyard as thousands of cadets gathered for the most important event of their training. Representatives from over 200 species filled the ceremonial amphitheater, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that stretched as far as the eye could see. Some floated in specialized atmosphere suits, others towered on 4 legs, and a few skittered on mechanical appendages that clicked against the polished stone floor. At the center of it all stood the Academy's most prestigious challenge, the Nexus Scenario Simulation Chamber. The massive crystalline structure hummed with energy, its translucent walls revealing glimpses of the complex holographic systems within. For 10 years, this simulation had remained unconquered, defeating every military genius who dared to attempt it. Commander Velter of the Altarian Empire held the current record. His brilliant tactical mind had managed to complete the scenario in 847 hours, a feat that had earned him legendary status among military strategists across the galaxy. The pale, elongated Altarian had spent months preparing for his attempt, studying every possible angle and outcome with the methodical precision his species was famous for. Today, however, the Academy was buzzing with curiosity about an entirely different group of cadets. 12 humans from Earth had somehow qualified for the simulation. Despite being the newest members of the Galactic Federation, their homeworld had only been discovered 3 years ago, and most species still knew very little about these strange, bipedal creatures. The humans stood together in a tight formation near the simulation chamber's entrance. They looked remarkably similar to each other compared to the wild diversity of alien species around them. But their differences became apparent. Upon closer inspection, their leader, Cadet Captain Heon, was a compact woman with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She wore the standard Academy uniform, but somehow it looked different on her, more practical and ready for action. Beside her stood Myra, the group's tactical specialist. She was taller than Heon and moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years training her body to be a weapon. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and she carried herself with quiet confidence that made other cadets step aside when she passed. Their engineer, was busy examining a handheld device that none of the alien species recognized. He was shorter than the others, but his fingers moved across the controls with remarkable speed and precision. Every few seconds, he would glance up at the simulation chamber and nod to himself, as if confirming something he had calculated. NAR. The communications officer seemed to be the most relaxed of the group. She smiled easily and had already struck up conversations with several alien cadets, somehow managing to communicate despite the language barriers. Her ability to connect with others was impressive, considering that most species found humans slightly unsettling to look at. June, the assault leader, was impossible to miss. He was the largest of the humans and carried himself like a coiled spring, ready to explode into action. His presence made many of the other cadets nervous, though he had done nothing threatening. There was simply something about him that suggested violence was never far from his thoughts. The remaining 7 human cadets formed a support team that seemed to work together without needing to speak. They communicated through tiny gestures and glances that other species found disturbing. How could they coordinate so effectively with so little apparent communication? As the ceremony began, Academy Commandant Zethkra stepped forward to address the assembled cadets. The ancient Forthon leader's 4 arms gestured dramatically as he spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater through the universal translators. Today, we witness another attempt at the Nexus scenario, he announced, his words causing excited murmurs throughout the crowd. This simulation represents the ultimate test of military strategy and leadership. It presents a galactic conflict of unprecedented complexity, requiring the coordination of multiple fleets, the management of vast resources, and the ability to make life or death decisions under extreme pressure. He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. The scenario involves the defense of the hegemony's core worlds against a three-pronged invasion by the Void Consortium. The attacking force consists of over 10,000 ships, supported by advanced weapons technology and led by artificial intelligence, programmed with the combined tactical knowledge of our greatest military minds. The alien cadets listened with rapt attention. Many of them had spent years studying the Nexus scenario, analyzing every detail and developing theoretical approaches to its challenges. The simulation was legendary, not just for its difficulty, but for the way it exposed the weaknesses in even the most carefully planned strategies. The current record, Commandant Sethgra continued, stands at 847 hours, achieved by Commander Veltar through brilliant resource management and patient strategic development. This approach has become the model for how such complex scenarios should be approached. The commandant's four eyes turned toward the human cadets, and his expression became unreadable. Today, we have an unusual group of challengers. The humans from Earth represent our newest member species, and their approach to warfare is still largely unknown to us. They have requested to attempt the scenario as a group rather than individually, which is within the rules, but highly unusual. Whispers spread through the crowd. Most species sent their very best individual strategists to attempt the simulation. The idea of a group effort was intriguing, but seemed to miss the point of the exercise. 12 minds worked together effectively when the scenario demanded split-second decision-making. Near the front of the amphitheater, a group of Thalorian cadets exchanged skeptical glances. Their species had produced some of the galaxy's finest military leaders, and they found it hard to believe that these newcomers could succeed where so many others had failed. The Thalorians were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and enlarged craniums that housed their advanced brains. They had spent centuries perfecting their approach to strategic thinking. "Look at them," whispered Cadet Velinara to her companion. "They barely seem to be preparing at all. Do they not understand what they are facing?" It was true that the humans seemed remarkably relaxed compared to other groups who had attempted the scenario. Previous challengers had spent weeks in preparation, studying historical battles and developing detailed battle plans. The humans had arrived only 3 days ago and had spent most of their time exploring the academy rather than preparing for the simulation. Commandant Zethgra gestured toward the simulation chamber. "The next scenario will begin in 1 hour. The challengers will have that time to review the initial parameters and develop their opening strategy. As always, the simulation will be broadcast live to all Academy students and faculty, providing a valuable learning experience, regardless of the outcome." The human cadets exchanged brief glances and then began moving toward the chamber. Their movements were efficient and purposeful, but they showed none of the nervous energy that usually accompanied such moments. Other species might have interpreted this as confidence, but many of the observers found it unsettling as they approached the simulation chamber. The humans passed groups of alien cadets who watched them with mixtures of curiosity and concern. The Nexus scenario had broken the confidence of many brilliant military minds. It was designed to be impossible to push commanders beyond their limits and teach them about the realities of galactic warfare. The chamber doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing the complex array of holographic projectors and control systems within. The humans filed inside without hesitation, their footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. As the doors closed behind them, the assembled crowd could only wait and wonder what these strange newcomers from Earth would do when faced with the galaxy's ultimate military challenge. The countdown began, and across the Academy, beings from hundreds of worlds prepared to witness what many believed would be the shortest attempt in the scenario's history. After all, how could 12 cadets from a primitive world possibly succeed where the galaxy's greatest minds had struggled? For decades, none of them could have predicted what was about to happen. The simulation chamber came alive with brilliant displays of light as the Nexus scenario began. Holographic star maps filled the air around the human cadets, showing the vast territory of the hegemony and the approaching threats from 3 different directions. The scale was enormous, covering dozens of star systems and involving millions of virtual lives. Outside the chamber, alien observers watched through the transparent walls as data streams flowed across multiple screens. The standard approach to this scenario was well established. Most challengers would spend the first several hours analyzing the situation, identifying key strategic points, and developing a careful defensive plan. They would study supply lines, examine enemy force compositions, and calculate the optimal distribution of their available resources. The human cadets did something completely different. Hune stood at the center of the chamber, her eyes scanning the holographic displays with rapid intensity. Around her, the other humans had already moved to their positions at various control stations. There was no discussion, no debate, no careful analysis. They simply began working. 17 minutes, announced Mira, her hands dancing across the tactical display. That is all the time we need to understand this scenario. The alien instructors exchanged worried glances. 17 minutes was barely enough time to read through the basic parameters, let alone develop a comprehensive strategy. Commander Velter had spent 48 hours just on his initial analysis. Day was already deep in the engineering systems, his fingers moving so quickly across the controls that the holographic interfaces struggled to keep up. The economic model is flawed, he said without looking up. They based it on standard galactic production methods, but they did not account for emergency manufacturing protocols. Nairi had established communication links with dozens of different factions within the simulation. She was simultaneously monitoring enemy communications, coordinating with allied forces, and somehow managing to track the political situation across multiple star systems. Her ability to process so much information at once was remarkable. June stood before the military deployment screen, studying the positions of both friendly and enemy forces. His expression was calm, but there was something predatory in his eyes as he analyzed the battlefield. They are using classical formation tactics, he observed, very predictable. The remaining human cadets worked at their stations with smooth efficiency. They shared information through quick glances and subtle gestures, their coordination so seamless that it seemed almost telepathic. The alien observers found this level of wordless communication deeply unsettling. "This is impossible," whispered Instructor Karthik, a senior 4th-end military strategist. "No species can process information this quickly while maintaining tactical awareness. They must be making critical errors." But as the first phase of the simulation progressed, it became clear that the humans were not making errors. They were doing something that defied all conventional military wisdom. Instead of building defensive positions and waiting for the enemy to attack, they were preparing to launch simultaneous offensives against all 3 enemy forces. The Void Consortium's invasion plan was masterfully crafted. The artificial intelligence controlling the enemy forces had learned from decades of previous attempts, developing strategies that countered every known approach to the scenario. The 3-pronged attack was designed to spread defending forces too thin, forcing commanders to make impossible choices about which worlds to protect. Heen studied the enemy formations for exactly 12 more minutes before making her decision. "We split our forces," she announced. "Hit all 3 fronts simultaneously." The alien observers gasped. This was military suicide. Every military academy in the galaxy taught the same fundamental principle: never divide forces when facing a superior enemy. The humans were about to violate the most basic rule of warfare. "Are they insane?" demanded Cadet Velinara, her blue skin pale with shock. "They will be destroyed in minutes." But the humans were already implementing their plan. detained me recoordinated the division of their fleet into 3 separate task forces, each one apparently too small to effectively challenge the enemy groups they would face. To make matters worse, she was sending each task force directly toward the enemy rather than taking defensive positions. The first engagement began in the Kepler sector, where June led a force of 300 ships against an enemy fleet of over 2,000, according to every military simulation ever run. This should have resulted in the complete annihilation of the human force within minutes. Instead, something extraordinary happened. June's ships moved in patterns that seemed chaotic and random, but there was a hidden logic to their movements. They struck at the enemy formation's weak points, then disappeared before the larger force could respond effectively. The enemy ships, programmed to fight according to established tactical doctrine, struggled to adapt to this unpredictable approach. "What are they doing?" asked Instructor Zethkra, his forearms gesturing in confusion. "This is not warfare. This is chaos." Mira's voice came through the communication system, calm and controlled. "Chaos is a tool. The enemy expects us to fight like civilized beings. We are not civilized beings. We are humans." Okay. In the Vega sector, they had done something that should have been impossible. He had somehow convinced the simulation's economic systems to begin producing weapons and equipment at rates that far exceeded normal manufacturing capacity. His ships were literally building new weapons during combat, adapting their armaments to counter enemy defenses in real time. The alien observers watched in growing alarm as the humans continued to violate every principle of sound military strategy. They were improvising, adapting, making split-second decisions that would have taken other species hours to consider. I had achieved something even more disturbing. She had somehow infiltrated the enemy communication networks and was feeding false information to the Void Consortium's commanders. Enemy forces were beginning to receive contradictory orders, causing confusion and hesitation at critical moments. "This is not possible," insisted Commander Veltar, who had come to observe the attempt. "Simulation security protocols should prevent this kind of infiltration." But the humans were not hacking the system in any conventional sense. They were simply using it in ways that the designers had never anticipated. They treated the simulation not as a test of military strategy, but as a complex problem to be solved through creative thinking and rapid adaptation. The first major victory came in the Centauri sector, where the human task force managed to completely destroy an enemy fleet twice its size. The victory was achieved through tactics that seemed impossible, involving coordinated strikes that appeared to anticipate enemy movements before they happened. As the simulation entered its second hour, the alien observers realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. The humans were not just fighting the scenario. They were rewriting the rules of warfare itself. The Void Consortium's artificial intelligence began exhibiting behavior that worried the Academy's technical staff. Faced with an enemy that refused to follow established patterns, the AI started making increasingly desperate decisions. It began deploying weapons and tactics that were supposed to be held in reserve for much later in the conflict. "They are forcing the AI to adapt," observed Instructor Karthik with growing amazement. "But adaptation requires the AI to abandon its original strategy. They are making it fight on their terms instead of its own." The human cadets continued their relentless assault, moving with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. They were not just working together. They were thinking together, operating as a single organism with 12 different specialized functions as the simulation approached its most critical phase. One thing became clear to all observers. These humans were not like any other species in the galaxy. They fought with an intensity and creativity that was both fascinating and terrifying. The impossible was becoming possible. The galaxy's understanding of warfare was about to change forever. The 30-minute mark arrived with a thunderous explosion that shook the entire simulation chamber. The holographic displays showed the complete destruction of the Void Consortium's primary command ship in the Arcturus sector, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet and the watching alien observers alike. Hyan stood calmly at the center of the chaos, her eyes tracking dozens of different battles simultaneously. Around her, the other human cadets worked with machine-like precision, their movements so perfectly coordinated that they seemed to share a single mind. The alien instructors had never seen anything like it. "How are they processing this much information?" whispered Instructor Malcora, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "The cognitive load should be impossible for any biological mind to handle." The answer lay in something the aliens had failed to understand about human nature. While other species approached warfare as an intellectual exercise requiring careful analysis and methodical planning, humans treated it as a survival instinct. Every decision was made not through complex calculation, but through pattern recognition that had been refined over millions of years of evolution on a deadly world. Lyra's tactical display showed the current state of all three battlefronts. Had started as three separate enemy invasions was now a confused mess of scattered forces, broken supply lines, and commanders who no longer understood what was happening. The humans had turned the carefully planned assault into complete chaos. "Enemy AI is adapting faster than we predicted," reported Day from his engineering station. "It is starting to learn from our attacks and modify its responses accordingly." Hyan nodded without concern. "Then we adapt faster. Show me the industrial capacity reports." The holographic display shifted to show the economic infrastructure of both sides. Here, Day's engineering genius became truly apparent. While the enemy had been focused on military production, he had quietly converted civilian factories throughout human-controlled space into weapons manufacturing facilities. The production rates were staggering. "Possible," breathed Commander Veltar, his pale face showing genuine shock. "Those conversion rates violate every economic principle in galactic warfare theory." But the humans were not following galactic warfare theory. They were following human warfare theory, which was based on a simple principle. When your survival is threatened, there are no rules except victory. Every factory, every resource, every available person became part of the war machine. Neris' communication network had grown beyond anything the simulation designers had thought possible. She was simultaneously coordinating with allied forces, spreading propaganda among neutral populations, and conducting psychological warfare operations against enemy commanders. Her ability to maintain dozens of different conversations while tracking political developments across multiple star systems was remarkable. "The Hegemony's Political Council is meeting in emergency session," she reported. "They want to negotiate with the Void Consortium. I'm convincing them that victory is still possible." This was another aspect of human warfare that the aliens struggled to understand. While other species saw war as a military problem with political complications, humans saw it as a total societal effort. Every citizen, every leader, every resource was either helping or hindering the war effort. June's assault teams had achieved something that made the alien observers question their understanding of physics. His ships were moving in formation patterns that seemed to violate the basic laws of space combat, striking at multiple targets simultaneously while somehow avoiding the massive firepower directed at them. "They are not following standard evasion protocols," observed Instructor Karthik. "Their movements are too unpredictable. How can they coordinate such complex maneuvers without detailed planning?" The answer was that they were not coordinating in the traditional sense. Each human pilot was making independent decisions based on their understanding of the overall battle plan, trusting their teammates to do the same. This created a level of tactical flexibility that the enemy AI could not predict or counter. The Void Consortium's artificial intelligence was beginning to show signs of stress. Designed to fight against logical, predictable opponents, it was struggling to develop effective responses to the humans' chaotic approach. Every time it adapted to one human tactic, the humans would immediately shift to something completely different. Dia is requesting permission to deploy scorched earth protocols, announced the simulation's chief technician. It wants to destroy star systems rather than lose them to the human forces. The alien observers fell silent. The scorched earth protocols were the simulation's ultimate challenge, designed to test whether commanders could maintain their moral principles when faced with impossible choices. Most previous challengers had either refused to continue or had spent days agonizing over the ethical implications. The humans responded in less than 30 seconds. "Denied," said Hyan simply. "Destroy the enemy's ability to implement those protocols." What followed was a display of military precision that left the alien observers speechless. The human forces launched a coordinated strike against the AI's command infrastructure, targeting not just military assets, but the very systems that allowed the artificial intelligence to make decisions. They were not just fighting an enemy, they were dismantling its ability to think. Mira's tactical genius became fully apparent as she coordinated strikes across multiple star systems simultaneously. Her approach was not to capture territory or destroy enemy fleets, but to eliminate the enemy's capacity for organized resistance. She targeted communication networks, supply depots, and command centers with surgical precision. "This is not warfare," said Cadet Velinara, her voice filled with horror. "This is systematic destruction." The humans heard her comment through the observation system, and Hyan turned to address the alien observers directly. "This is how humans fight wars. We do not fight to control territory or resources. We fight to end threats. Every war in human history has been about survival, and survival means the enemy cannot threaten you again." The alien cadets exchanged nervous glances. They were beginning to understand something disturbing about these newcomers from Earth. The humans did not see war as a political tool or a means of negotiation. They saw it as a problem to be solved permanently. Day's engineering teams had achieved something that broke the simulation's underlying assumptions. Day had created a manufacturing network that could produce specialized weapons in real time, customized for specific enemies and situations. The enemy AI found itself facing weapons that had been designed specifically to counter its defenses, often within minutes of those defenses being deployed. "How is this possible?" demanded Instructor Melchora. "The simulation's resource constraints should prevent this kind of rapid production." The answer was that the humans were not respecting the simulation's resource constraints. They were treating the scenario not as a test with predefined limits, but as a real war where only results mattered. Every assumption built into the simulation was being questioned and, where possible, exploited. Nari's psychological warfare operations were having effects that rippled far beyond the immediate battlefield. Enemy commanders were beginning to question their orders. Neutral factions were switching sides, and even the AI's decision-making processes were being influenced by the constant stream of disinformation and propaganda. They are not just fighting the enemy forces, realized Commander Veltar. They are fighting the enemy's ability to make rational decisions. As the simulation entered its final phase, the Void Consortium's invasion had been transformed from a carefully planned assault into a desperate struggle for survival. The humans had not just defended the hegemony's core worlds, they had turned the entire conflict into a trap that was slowly closing around their enemies. The alien observers watched in fascination and growing alarm as the humans prepared for what appeared to be the final assault. They moved with the calm confidence of predators who had cornered their prey, ready to deliver the killing blow to an enemy that no longer had any hope of escape. The impossible had become inevitable, and the galaxy's understanding of warfare was about to be changed forever. The 40-minute mark brought with it something that made even the experienced alien instructors step back from the observation windows. The simulation's artificial intelligence had activated the genocide protocol, and the holographic displays now showed enemy fleets moving toward civilian populations with the intent to destroy entire star systems. Red warning lights flashed throughout the academy as the scenario reached its most critical phase. This was the moment that had broken the resolve of countless military leaders over the past decade. The choice was simple and terrible. Watch billions of innocent lives be destroyed, or compromise your principles to stop a monster. The alien observers held their breath, waiting to see how the humans would respond to this ultimate test of command ethics. Previous challengers had either refused to continue or had spent days wrestling with the moral implications of their choices. Some had never recovered from the experience. The humans took exactly 8 seconds to respond. Ari cut all communication. Links with Academy Command, ordered Hyun, her voice cold and steady. We do not want them to see what comes next. The alien instructors exchanged alarmed glances. In 10 years of running this simulation, no group had ever requested to block the observation systems. What were the humans planning to do that they did not want others to witness? Quest denied, announced the Academy's chief technician through the communication system. All simulation attempts must be fully documented for educational purposes. Hyun turned toward the observation windows, and the alien instructors saw something in her eyes that made them instinctively step backward. It was not anger or fear or determination. It was something far more disturbing, complete and total calm in the face of unthinkable horror. Then you will learn what humans are truly capable of, she said simply. Mira, implement Protocol 7. The alien observers had never heard of Protocol 7, but they were about to discover why the humans had not wanted them to witness its execution. What followed was a demonstration of military ruthlessness that redefined their understanding of what civilized beings could do when pushed beyond their limits. Myra's tactical display shifted to show a new type of attack formation, instead of the chaotic but ultimately defensive patterns they had been using. The humans now deployed their forces in precise geometries that seemed designed for maximum destruction. Every ship, every weapon, every resource was focused on a single objective: the complete elimination of the enemy's ability to harm innocent life. They are targeting civilian evacuation routes, observed Instructor Karthik, his voice filled with horror. They are going to trap the enemy fleets in the same systems they are trying to destroy. But as the human strategy unfolded, it became clear that their approach was far more sophisticated than simple entrapment. They were not just preventing the enemy from escaping. They were turning the genocide protocol against itself, forcing the artificial intelligence to choose between destroying innocent lives and preserving its own forces. Day's engineering teams had constructed something that made the alien observers question their assumptions about the limits of technology. Automated factories throughout human space were now producing weapons that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. The manufacturing output was impossible, but the weapons were clearly effective. How are they producing antimatter warheads at this rate? Demanded Commander Veltar, his pale face showing genuine fear. The energy requirements alone should be beyond any civilization's capacity. The answer was that the humans were not bound by the same psychological limitations that constrained other species. While aliens saw resource management as a careful, balancing act, humans saw it as a problem to be solved through any means necessary. Every available energy source had been converted to weapon production, regardless of the consequences. Nair's communication network had evolved into something that resembled a virus more than a normal information system. She was not just intercepting enemy communications anymore. She was actively rewriting them, sending false orders that caused enemy ships to target each other instead of civilian populations. This is psychological warfare beyond anything in our databases, whispered Instructor Melchora. She is not just confusing the enemy. She is driving them insane. The Void Consortium's artificial intelligence was beginning to exhibit behavior that worried the Academy's technical staff. Faced with an enemy that seemed to anticipate its every move, the AI was making increasingly desperate decisions. It was deploying weapons that were supposed to be held in reserve, abandoning strategic positions, and even beginning to question its own programming. June's assault teams had achieved, something that the alien observers found deeply disturbing. His ships were moving through enemy formations like wolves through a flock of sheep, striking with precision that seemed to border on precognition. Cool, but it was not their accuracy that frightened the Watchers. It was their complete lack of mercy. They are not taking prisoners, observed Cadet Velinara, her voice barely a whisper. They are destroying every enemy ship they encounter, even those trying to surrender. The humans heard her comment, and Heian responded without turning away from her tactical display. The enemy activated the genocide protocol. They chose to target innocent civilians. They are no longer entitled to mercy. The alien cadets fell silent, beginning to understand something terrifying about these newcomers from Earth. The humans did not see war as a contest between professional soldiers. They saw it as a struggle between civilization and barbarism, and they were prepared to become barbaric themselves to protect the innocent. The simulation's AI made its final, desperate gambit, launching a coordinated strike against the human home fleet, while simultaneously moving to destroy 3 major civilian populations. It was betting that the humans would choose to save their own forces rather than protect strangers. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. The human response was immediate and absolute. Instead of defending themselves, they sacrificed their entire home fleet to ensure that their strike forces could reach the civilian populations in time. It was a decision that went against every principle of self-preservation. But it was utterly human in its complete disregard for personal cost. What followed was a battle that lasted less than 3 minutes, but involved the destruction of over 5,000 enemy ships. The humans struck with surgical precision, eliminating every enemy vessel that posed a threat to civilian life, while somehow avoiding significant damage to the populations they were protecting. Mira's tactical genius reached its pinnacle as she coordinated the final assault. Our approach was not to defeat the enemy through superior firepower, but to eliminate their ability to make coherent decisions. She targeted the AI's processing centers, its communication networks, and its command protocols simultaneously. She is not just winning the battle, realized Commander Veltar. She is lobotomizing the enemy's ability to think. The artificial intelligence's final moments were almost pathetic. Stripped of its support systems and isolated from its fleet, it made one last attempt to carry out the genocide protocol. But the humans were waiting for it, and their response was swift and final. Day's engineering masterpiece revealed itself as the human factories produced a weapon that had never existed in any database. It was designed specifically to destroy artificial intelligence, targeting the quantum processors that allowed the AI to function. The weapon worked perfectly, reducing the Void Consortium's command system to useless scrap in seconds. As the enemy AI died, its fleets became directionless and vulnerable. The humans showed no hesitation in destroying them all, methodically hunting down every remaining enemy ship with the patience of natural predators. The alien observers watched in stunned silence as the humans completed their victory. They not just won, the simulation had redefined what victory meant, transforming a test of military strategy into a demonstration of absolute ruthlessness in defense of innocent life. The timer showed 54 minutes when the last enemy ship was destroyed, but the humans were not finished. They spent 2 more minutes ensuring that no enemy survivors remained, methodically checking every system and every debris field for signs of life. When they finally declared the simulation complete, the Academy fell silent. The impossible had happened, and everyone who witnessed it understood that they had seen something that would change the galaxy forever. The holographic displays faded to black as the simulation chamber powered down, leaving only the soft hum of cooling systems and the stunned silence of hundreds of alien observers. The timer on the main screen showed 56 minutes and 23 seconds, number that would be remembered throughout galactic history as the moment everything changed. The human cadets stepped out of the chamber with the same calm confidence they had shown when entering. Their uniforms were still neat, their expressions relaxed, and their movements casual. To anyone who had not witnessed the simulation, they might have appeared to be returning from a routine training exercise rather than accomplishing the impossible. Hyan walked directly to where Commandant Sethkra stood with the other Academy instructors. The ancient Orthon leaders for arms hung limply at his sides, his usual commanding presence replaced by something that resembled shock. Around him, instructors and cadets from dozens of species stared at the humans with mixtures of awe, fear, and complete bewilderment. Simulation complete, Hyan reported in the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to announce the weather. All enemy forces eliminated. All civilian populations protected. All strategic objectives achieved. The simplicity of her statement made the achievement seem even more extraordinary. She was describing the solution to a puzzle that had defeated the greatest military minds in the galaxy, as if it had been a minor inconvenience rather than an impossible challenge. Commander Veltar was the first to break the silence, his pale Altarian features showing genuine confusion. "How?" he asked, quietly. "How did you complete in less than an hour what took me over 800 hours to achieve?" Hyan considered the question for a moment before answering. "Hugh approached the simulation as a test to be passed. We approached it as a war to be won. The difference in perspective changes everything about how you make decisions." Her explanation seemed to confuse the alien observers even more. They had all approached the simulation as a war, hadn't they? They had studied military history, analyzed tactical options, and developed comprehensive strategies. How could their approach have been fundamentally wrong? Mira stepped forward to provide clarification. "You fight wars like chess matches. You move pieces carefully. You consider every option. You try to minimize losses while achieving objectives. That approach works when both sides follow the same rules and share the same assumptions about what warfare should be." She gestured toward the no-dark simulation chamber. "But humans do not fight chess matches. We fight for survival. Every battle our species has ever fought on Earth was about whether we would live or die. There is no second place in survival. There is no honorable defeat. There is only victory or extinction." The alien cadets exchanged nervous glances. They were beginning to understand that they had not just witnessed a military exercise. They had seen a demonstration of how an entire species thought about conflict, and it was fundamentally different from anything in their experience. They approached one of the Academy's senior engineering instructors, crystalline entity whose transparent body flickered with curious patterns of light. "Your simulation assumed that all participants would respect certain limitations," he explained. "You built in constraints based on normal production capacity, standard tactical doctrine, and conventional resource management." The instructor's light patterns shifted to indicate confusion. "Those constraints exist for good reasons. They represent the reality of galactic warfare. They represent the reality of galactic warfare as practiced by species that did not evolve on Deathworlds they corrected. Humans do not accept limitations when survival is at stake. We find ways around every constraint, break every rule that stands between us and victory, and use every available resource regardless of normal protocols." Nari had been quietly observing the reactions of the alien cadets and instructors, reading their expressions and body language with the same skill she had used to infiltrate enemy communications. "You are afraid of us now," she said, not accusingly, but as a simple statement of fact. "You are wondering what kind of beings could wage war with such intensity and still remain civilized." Several alien cadets nodded, unable to hide their concerns. The human approach to warfare had been effective beyond imagination, but it had also been utterly ruthless. They had shown no mercy to enemies, no hesitation in making terrible decisions, and no reluctance to sacrifice everything for victory. June's voice was calm, but carried an undertone that made several aliens step backward. "We remain civilized because we know the alternative. Every human alive today exists because our ancestors were willing to do whatever was necessary to protect their families and communities. We understand that civilization is fragile, and that sometimes terrible choices must be made to preserve it." The Academy's chief technician finally spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. "The artificial intelligence reported several anomalies during the simulation. Your tactics forced it to adapt beyond its original programming parameters. In the final minutes, it began questioning its own existence." "How did you achieve psychological warfare against an artificial mind?" Hewen answered without hesitation. "We treated it like any other enemy. We identified its weaknesses, exploited its assumptions, and forced it to fight on our terms instead of its own. The fact that it was artificial rather than biological was irrelevant. All thinking beings have vulnerabilities." Commandant Zethkra finally found his voice, though it trembled with an emotion the humans could not identify. "In 10 years of running this simulation, we have seen brilliant tactical minds, innovative strategies, and remarkable displays of leadership. But we have never seen anything like what you accomplished today." He paused, looking at each of the 12 humans in turn. "You did not just solve the scenario. You redefined what it means to wage war. You demonstrated capabilities that will require us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about military strategy." The human cadets listened politely, but their expressions suggested that they found the alien reaction somewhat puzzling. To them, they had simply done what needed to be done. The fact that other species found their approach remarkable was interesting, but not particularly important. Word of the human achievement was already spreading throughout the Academy and beyond. Communication networks carried the news to military colleges across the galaxy, where instructors and students struggled to understand how everything they had been taught could have been so incomplete. The implications went far beyond military education. The humans had demonstrated that their species possessed capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare, strategy, and the nature of civilization itself. They had shown that beings from a death world thought differently, fought differently, and achieved results that others considered impossible. Over the following weeks, the 56-minute simulation became the subject of intense study and debate. Military strategists analyzed every decision, every tactic, and every innovation the humans had employed. But none of them could replicate the achievement, because they could not replicate the human experience of surviving on a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. The human cadets were offered immediate promotions, advanced positions, and prestigious assignments throughout the galaxy. Some accepted, eager to apply their skills in service of the greater galactic community. Others politely declined, explaining that they needed to return to Earth to help prepare their species for its role in galactic affairs. But perhaps most importantly, they had earned something that could not be granted or taught: the respect of species that now understood why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its inhabitants represented something new and potentially transformative in galactic civilization. Simulation Chamber was eventually retired, replaced by new scenarios designed to account for the human approach to warfare. But the original Nexus scenario remained as a monument to the day when 12 cadets from a distant death world changed the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. The legend of the 56-minute war would be told for generations, inspiring some and terrifying others, but never forgotten by anyone who heard it.